Welcome to Lyrical Laureates, where we turn lyrics into literature. If you're here, you're probably a hip-hop head who's tired of people treating hip-hop like it's less sophisticated than quote-unquote real literature. Or maybe you're just curious about what happens when you examine a J. Cole album the same way you'd analyze, say, Shakespeare. But whatever brought you here, I'm glad you're here. This is Lyrical Laureates, and I'm going to tell you what this project is, why it exists, and why it mattered. So my doctoral research examined how jazz improvisers achieve creative expertise. During my study, participants provided autobiographical accounts of activities that I categorized into 4 domains of development titled the Giant Steps Framework after John Coltrane's seminal composition. What I found was that the first stage of this development was a meaningful exposure to the art form, after which participants make a decision to study seriously and then begin to engage in deliberate practice, or what jazz musicians call going to the woodshed. Throughout this stage, there were authentic performance opportunities that are provided to the budding musician to help them understand what it's like to be in the community of professionals. And lastly, the musicians find their own voice, meaning that they begin to make unique creative contributions to the domain. And here's the interesting thing. Hip-hop follows very similar patterns. When you look closely at how MCs develop, how they build on their predecessors, how they transform the techniques that others have pioneered, the narrative sophistication they use, the wordplay, the way a great MC can tell you an entire story in under 4 minutes. You see the same progression that produces excellence in jazz, in hip-hop, and potentially in any creative domain. We've always known hip-hop was brilliant, and I'm doing this because the art form deserves serious scholarly attention, not to validate it. Hip-hop does not need validation, but to explore it, to understand what makes it work at the highest levels, and to increase its value by examining it with the same rigor we bring to any art form we take seriously. Here's the thing. Hip-hop has been producing literary work at the same level of sophistication as great novels and poetry for decades. I initially got this idea one day when I was actually looking at Black Thought from the Roots, at his body of work and the amount of literature and topics and history that I had learned just by listening to him. I really sat and thought and said, this man could really be worthy of a Nobel Prize in literature, except the fact that he's making hip-hop music and no one is going to value it in that particular realm. So I chose to. So when we look at J. Cole, who's the first person that I write about, and how he builds a dual coming-of-age narrative on the fall-off, I want to recognize that as not just deep lyrics, but sophisticated literary architecture. Similarly, when Kendrick constructs Good Kid, Mad City as a cinematic narrative with unreliable narration, he's deploying the same techniques that Toni Morrison uses in Beloved. Or when Nas creates Rewind, wrapping an entire story backwards, he's building on temporal innovations that Octavia Butler pioneered in Kindred. When artists sample and interpolate, they're creating the same kind of intertextual dialogue that James Baldwin creates when he weaves together scripture, blues, and social critique. The techniques are there. The sophistication is there. The formal innovation is there. We just haven't been examining it closely enough. And when we don't look at hip-hop with serious analytical tools, we miss understanding how creative mastery actually develops. We miss seeing the patterns. We miss learning from one of the most dynamic creative traditions of the last 50 years. This isn't about making hip-hop respectable. This is about recognizing that hip-hop is literature that deserves serious attention. So here's what Lyrical Laureates does. I publish literary analyses examining hip hop albums and songs and even verses as sophisticated literary text. This is not to critique the work, but to laud the best of the best and recognize the skill and expertise that is on display each time they bless the mic. This is much more connoisseurship than it is criticism. I'll be examining albums and work by artists who embrace narrative sophistication, innovation within their craft, thematic depth, and things that we can analyze scholarly. We'll look at things like the narrative structure, what literary devices are being deployed, how does the language work, how is it being used, and what can this tell us about creative development? And then I create these shorter audio companions like what you're listening to now that highlight key insights and drive you to the deeper written work. The written analyses are intentionally rigorous with citations and literary theory, but I'm making it accessible. You don't need an advanced degree to understand it. You just need to be interested in hip hop and willing to listen closely. So I just published the first of these, examining J. Cole's The Fall Off as a dual coming-of-age narrative with 4 temporal registers operating simultaneously. It connects Cole's techniques to James Baldwin's essays on identity and time, Toni Morrison's narrative innovations, and Ralph Ellison's exploration of consciousness. So, subscribe to get monthly analyses in your inbox, share it with others who might be interested, engage in the comments, and use the materials if you're an educator in your classroom or workshops. I'm happy to help you and provide you any tools and resources that I might have. In closing, hip-hop doesn't need literature's approval. Hip-hop has been brilliant for decades, whether academics want to acknowledge it or not. But the art form deserves serious analysis. And understanding how artists reach expert levels of sophistication, how they build on and transform techniques from their predecessors, reveals how creative mastery actually develops. Hip-hop is literature. Let's examine it accordingly. Thank you for being here. This is Lyrical Laureates. I'm Dr. Anthony Washington.